Centers it. Teal.
I thought he was gone for a week. But I'm not. Gets Good morning. Welcome to Iron Sharpens Iron Athletes in Action Breakfast celebrating Father's Day. My name is Ken Bell. I was the sports director at ABC6 in Providence for 35 years, and I serve on the advisory board for Athletes in Action in New England. And I'm joined by Walt Day. Walt is also with Athletes in Action. He's the pro sports ministry leader in New England. Walt, you served as chaplain for both the Red Sox and the Patriots over a 13-year period. Had to be a meaningful time for you.
Yeah, it was a fun time for me to be able to combine that the pro sports I always enjoyed with the spiritual dimension. Saw a number of players come to faith. A lot of them had a big impact in the city and around the town. So that was a great time for me.
And you were behind the scenes for 5 world championships between the Red Sox and the
that
Patriots.
was quite a privilege to do that too.
We're going to hear from some big names during the next few minutes here, and we've got most all the pro teams represented out of Boston.
Yeah, we have a good lineup today. We have Torey Krug and Carlo from the Bruins, as well as Semi Ojeleye from the Boston Celtics, Teal Bunbury from the New England Revolution. And then we're going to wrap up with a special appearance from the Dirt Dog Trot Nixon, from the former player with the Boston Red Sox.
All right, this is going to be a wonderful time together. Before we start, I'd like to call on Brian Doyle, who is the National Director for Iron Sharpens Iron, who is in Orlando, Florida. And Brian, welcome. And you have a lot of men to address this morning. We're not able to get together because of the pandemic, but this allows us to have some fellowship thanks to the media.
You're exactly right. Thanks, Ken, and good to be with you all. You know, sports, great platform, influence, and the athletes we have today will be an example of that. But, you know, as you mentioned, it's June. We're celebrating fatherhood as a culture. There's no greater platform for a man than fatherhood. Being a dad, being a grandfather, being a mentor in the lives of young boys and girls that don't have a man in their home. Boy, what an influence we can have. And it's all about influence. You know, ministry to men is all about influence. It's men sharpening one another, but taking that outside and sharpening others, whether it's a pandemic or whether it isn't. We have an opportunity to be influencers. And I hope that today, this will be an encouragement. I know it will be for me, but for all the men that are joining us, it'll be an encouragement, not just to take it in, but to deliver it out, to be an encourager, to be that good man, that godly man that he can use in the lives of others.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks for all the work you do in encouraging men and youth all across the country and all across the world. And now, Walt, you spend your time encouraging athletes in pro sports in Boston, and we have one athlete here who really has a great story to tell because of his community involvement.
Right, yeah, we have Teal Bunbury joining us with us today. He's the star forward for the New England Revolution, and Teal, you may not know, was the 2010 Herman Award winner. So that's the most outstanding college soccer player in the country. He won that coming out of college. It was the first round draft pick into Kansas City in the MLS and traded to the Revolution. We've got pretty close over the last couple of years. So welcome, Teal. Glad to have you with us this morning.
Hey, Walt and Ken. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and excited to share a little bit about myself and I guess my story.
And you're still kicking.
Yeah.
Despite the pandemic, you're still kicking.
Still kicking, most definitely.
So, well, speaking of that, so you guys are heading off to Orlando pretty soon. It looks like you might be the first teams back on the field.
Yeah. So it's been kind of a long process, and we just kind of got it squared away with the league that we're going to have this tournament down in Orlando, and all the teams can start reporting there on June 24th at the earliest. And we're going to be partnering up with ESPN and the wide world of sports down there to have a little tournament that I think is going to be really exciting for fans, that we can get the product back on the field, have that fan engagement. It's been a long time, so it's been tough dealing with this. We want to make sure that we're, being safe and smart, but getting back to doing something we all love is really important, and we're excited.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting. I think the guys are going to be pretty hyped up when they're back in the field. We got a quick clip from the early days of the Revolution. This is a great goal we're going to turn to here. And folks, this is, I think you'll enjoy the games down in Orlando if you get a chance to watch. So let's take a quick watch at this clip here.
of direct traffic right now as he hands it wide for Bunbury. Bunbury dances his way past Oyongo. Teal Bunbury! What a goal! What a start for New England!
Well, that was a great goal there, Teal. And getting back to the personal side a little bit, you became a dad again recently.
Yeah, so we had our second baby girl who was born February 24th. She's almost 3 months now, or a little over 3 months, and she's just growing every day. And we have a 2.5-year-old. So our 2.5-year-old is named Sienna. Our 3.5-month-old is named Shay. And they're just the joy of my heart, and they're growing every day, and really exciting.
Well, you've been getting a lot of time with them recently, right? So that'll be keeping you busy.
Yeah, yeah. So the silver lining during this kind of crazy time is that I've been able to spend the first few months with a newborn. Well, usually I'm kind of off in preseason or I'm on the road a lot. So to be able to help out my wife in that way and just be available and see her grow, because at this young age, they grow so quickly. And so it's been a lot of fun for me.
Right, yeah, they're as cute as can be. And I've just been impressed with the way you carry yourself, the way you're going about being a dad and a husband and getting to know your wife, Katie. And could you share a little bit how your relationship with God, with Christ, has helped you as a father and a husband, how it plays out for you?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, being a Christ follower and diving into his word and getting a better understanding of how I'm supposed to be a leader, a spiritual leader in my household. As a husband, I believe first to show my daughters how they should be treated once they get old enough, but to make sure I'm always there available for my wife and my kids, being selfless. Even if I'm tired coming home from training, I think Christ gives me the strength to want to make sure I'm a good role model for them and showing them how to live spiritual life, spiritual filled life. And I think growing for me spiritually, I'm able to pass that on to them. And I know they're still young, but even the other day we've been streaming church on Sundays, and Sienna knows that we finish breakfast and she's like, "Time for church." She's
Oh,
already
that's
saying
great.
stuff like that. So I'm hoping it's something they can see in me as being a role model and making sure that I'm held accountable to do that in my household.
This is our Father's Day week special here, so I think you've done a great example of setting that for us. So thanks for sharing how that goes about in your household. So could you briefly tell us a little, stepping back a little bit, tell us how you came to Christ?
Yeah, I mean, it was my freshman year in college, which was about 2008, fall of 2008, spring of 2009. But when I first got to college, this teammate of mine, Steve Zakawani, who ended up going on to play in the MLS, really talented player. I look up to him as a mentor now, big brother. Um, but I got to college and I didn't really know who Christ was. I had heard about God and I would pray occasionally, but I felt something missing in my life, and I didn't know exactly what that was. But he was someone who was always positive, always able to emulate, that he could get through anything, whether it was, I went to school in Ohio and the weather there was awful, especially during winter time. So when it'd be really cold and whatnot, everybody had these miserable looks, and he would always be there, smiling and positive. And one time after a game, we were on a bus ride home, and I'm like, "Hey, like, what is it with you? There's something different about you, and I want to know what that is." And right then and there, he told me about Jesus Christ and how he died on the cross for our sins, and how if you believe in your heart, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, um, you can accept him right there and then. And the biggest thing I took away though is that it's a relationship, and that's something I could understand of having friendships, having my parents, being a brother. I knew about how to have a relationship, and it's a growing process and a journey. But now I continue to strive to be a better Christian in the terms of following Christ and growing in my relationship with him.
Well, thank you, Teal. That's encouraging to hear. And so now that it's been several years later, how do you go about your own growth in that walk with God? What are some of the things you do to grow in your relationship with Christ?
Yeah, it's an everyday occurrence where for me, I like to have quiet time as much as I can. It's a little harder when you have two little girls kind of running around a little bit, but I try to make that time early in the morning to have prayer. The Bible app is like my best friend, especially on the road. Um, but trying to have that quiet time, trying to read scripture. One of the biggest things is that we have our Bible study, and we have 3 or 4 guys, maybe even 5 guys, usually on the team that we can just have discussions once a week, and we could dive into His Word. We can read different books written by great authors, and have open discussion. And I think it's been a lot about spending time with Him, reading His Word, and just trying to worship. And I think doing that with you, it's been great. We've also been trying to give back and do certain outreaches and try to help those that are in need.
Great. Yeah, so you've really understood and bought into the idea of discipleship and really growing as to be a disciple of Christ, you would say?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's what Jesus wants us to do, is to be fishers of men, and I want to learn as much as I can, and also be able to find others that I can show what I've learned through Christ. And I think that's one of the most important things in life right now, is to figure out what your purpose is. And I think my purpose is to learn His Word and be able to use, whether it's my platform or just someone who's open, that I'm ready and I'm available to help them come to Christ.
Well, thanks, Chad. You've also done a great job. You've really been tireless in your efforts in the community, so I really appreciate that. So we're really thankful you could come here and be with us today. We want to wish you well down in Orlando and encourage people to check out Teal and the rest of the Revolution as they're starting off getting our teams back on the field. Thanks, Teal.
Thanks, Walt. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Teal. God bless you.
Yeah, you as well.
Side, cuts it, plays Teal, he goes wild, he goes in! He curled it in! The Reds have taken the lead!
Those are great comments by Teal. What a witness he has. So I'm anxious to introduce Dave Ripper. He's the Bruins chaplain for the last 5 years and also the pastor at Crossway Church. Thank you for being with us. Tell me about what it's like to be the chaplain for the Bruins. What have you learned and what have you gained over these last 5 years?
Well, thanks for having me, Ken, and I'm grateful to be with everyone here watching today as well. And it's been a real privilege and honor to get to be the chaplain of the Bruins. It started off in an unlikely way. I was friends with Adam Mcquaid, who was attending my church at the same time, and he gave a really powerful interview from the Boston Globe about his faith, and a group called Hockey Ministries picked that up and invited Adam to try and start a chapel program with the Bruins, and so they asked me to be a part of it, and I didn't have that much familiarity with hockey, and I was quite intimidated by the whole prospect, but I sensed God nudging me to step out in faith and to give it a shot. And honestly, a verse that the Lord impressed upon my heart a lot as I was nervous to kind of enter into the locker room, things like that, was from 2 Corinthians, where Paul says, and Jesus tells Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And I felt weak and overwhelmed and inadequate to do this, but God's power really has been unleashed through some of my senses of weakness. And it's been amazing to see over the last 5 years how many different players have come. At one point, we had more than half of the team coming out to hear about Jesus and the gospel, and it was just a remarkable thing and a great lesson for me to learn that if God's calling you or nudging you, say yes, even if you can't figure out how that's going to happen, how that's going to unfold. But God makes a way, and it's been a powerful experience to see how the Lord has worked.
You had an event at your church where a lot of the players were there, and we'd like to show some of the testimonies of the players now.
I grew up, going to Vacation Bible School, but never really attending church on Sundays. So I've always, believed in God and Jesus, but I didn't really practice. And then after my freshman year of college, I just so happened to be in the same place as my wife twice in one day without knowing who she was. And we just kind of had a connection right away. And I think, 3 or 4 days later, she invited me to church with her family. And that was the beginning of, my journey, getting closer and closer to Jesus and having a relationship with him and trying to live in the word and practice and be disciplined in my faith. And just being around her and her family has been a true blessing, and watching them, how they live through the word has been special. And ever since then, it's been blessing after blessing. And with different trials and hardships, I found myself closer and closer to more Christians as we sit today. A lot of special people in my life now, and just continue to grow and get closer. And like Dave talked about, that hunger to have a relationship with Jesus is, growing bigger and bigger, and just enjoying every step of the way. So
for me, growing up, here in Colorado, my family had some values with Christ and whatnot, but primarily would just go to church for the holiday seasons, Christmas and Easter. And so there was some of those things kind of instilled in me from the beginning, but never really took too much focus in that aspect of my life. And throughout those years, I started to learn more and more, but never really had much understanding or relationship with God. And then the biggest turning point in my life was going to chapel group with you guys when I first became a Bruin, and I've been so thankful for that ever since. Just that invitation kind of helped me to start beginning to take those steps with really giving my life to Christ. So in those situations, I think it's been really good for me to, have an unashamed relationship with God. Hockey, God is not as prevalent as other sports. So you don't know what the feeling of the room is going to be like when you're a younger guy coming in, and you just want to, stay within your boundaries and be the best guy that you can be. But with our Bruins chapel group being one of the, if not the largest in the NHL, I was very fortunate to kind of have my relationship start to take off with God from that point.
I grew up going to church. Ever since I was probably 3, I knew God was real. I knew Jesus was real. I knew I had to have a relationship with them. But as I got older, life gets harder. And I would always go with my parents to church, kind of follow their lead. But when I was around 14 or 15, I kind of took it to my own, and I got baptized, made it my own faith, and decided to really try to walk with Jesus and read the Bible and pray. Not to say that it's been easy, since I was 5, but you definitely go through some ups and downs. But coming to the Bruins and being a part of this chapel with a lot of guys who know Jesus has been a big blessing, and I'm really thankful for that.
The way I viewed things a little bit was, I try to do things that kind of out of fear of the Lord, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I was more worried about making God mad, and that in return I wouldn't get certain things in my life. And where things have changed now is, I do things more out of wanting to please the Lord, and out of thanks, from a thankful heart. And I think it was probably around the age of 25 that I really started to kind of dive into the Word a little bit more.
Everybody loves the big moment, the huge goal, the game-winning goal.
Bergeron, a shot save, rebound, Carlo scores! A short-handed goal! And for Carlo, it's his first ever goal in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
There's a flip side of that to the athlete, right? You're not going to win every game, and you're also living in a bubble with the fans, social media, so many things. How do you minister to athletes in this regard?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things about us is our minds, and what we put our minds on, what we focused on, is probably one of the most important things about us. So as we think about guiding and pastoring and anybody, especially athletes, is we need to make sure they pay attention to the right source of things. So we want our focus to be on Christ, as Colossians talks about. Don't set your mind on earthly things like what other people think of you, whether they be sports commentators or other haters out there, which on social media these days, there's no shortage of that. So let's make sure we don't allow our attention to gravitate to that more than it needs to, so that we can really listen first and foremost to the voice of Christ. And as we remember that we are God's beloved children, his beloved sons, that is what makes us who we are, not what other people think of us, not how much we achieve or how much we fail to achieve, or not what others really, their perceptions or how well we're liked. We are who we're loved by, and we're loved by a great God. And so as we help our players really keep that truth front and center, I think it's brought a lot of freedom, for them both on and off the ice.
So let's listen to what some of the athletes have to say about playing in the public eye, playing in the limelight, and how difficult that is.
Slot, and a shot by McAvoy is deflected wide. Helmetless is Krug. Jumps into the play, and a good, clean, hard hit.
Professional sports is at, many times a very lonely position in life, and we feel that we're based, or our value is in how we play. We feel like we're assets sometimes to a team. So after games, I found myself checking social media searching my name, seeing what other people were thinking about me, what the fans, the writers in Boston, Boston specifically is a very, very tough place to play, but it tends to bring out the best in athletes as well. So it was just, realizing that, it doesn't matter what other people think, because I've been blessed with a gift from God that has led me to this great city with a lot of great people. And, I've used that as a foundation of my faith and strength. And I'll share a quick story, and I don't even know if he knows this, but there was one day I was tying my skates in the locker room. I think it was the end of last season. And I just looked over, and Brandon always has a stick right there. And at the bottom, he just writes "with me" with a cross. And I started doing it as well. And I just realized that, no matter how lonely we feel, God is always with you. And that's, been a strong presence of, in my mind. And I always believe that. And it's led me to, feel more content and try to use the gift he's blessed me with, just to glorify him.
Early in my career, I didn't make the team out of my first training camp and was in the minors and kind of pleading, just saying if I could play one game in the NHL, then all of my work, all my parents' sacrifices wouldn't be in vain. And shortly after that, I got called up, played my first game, and it was during the holiday freeze on rosters. So I played a couple games. I said, wow, if I just play 10 games, then that'll be, like I didn't just get one, like I had more than a cup of coffee. I had like a full meal there. And then, by the end of that year, I was at 50, and I'm like, if I could just pay for my cars, have card paid for and maybe a down payment on a house, then I'm good. And then the goal became 100 games, and then it became 200 games. And then it was one more contract, and it was never satisfied as far as, okay, I made it, I'm good, I'm done, I've had enough. I've reached where I thought I wanted to reach. And, it's just an empty void that continues to expand no matter how much you throw into it. And I think on the flip side of it, when you're rooted in Christ and his identity for you, he's got unconditional love. He's created you perfectly in his image, and, certainly don't want to leave anything on the table, and you want to glorify him with all the gifts and attributes and abilities that he's given us. So that's kind of been at the forefront of what's driven me through 14 years of playing the game, along with, this glorious opportunity that we have, not only to play a game for a living, but to have a social platform as well.
Coming into the NHL nowadays with the social media aspect, it can become very difficult to focus a lot on opinions from different fans, whether it be from your own team or other teams or whatnot. So for me, that's something that I kind of struggled with my second year, and found myself being affected in a lot of ways, not only just as a person, but especially in the hockey aspect. So from that point forward, we had a couple of chapel discussions, and I think I remember it was Dan Heinen kind of shared this expression that he uses when he's going through a game or going through a tough time with hockey. And he said that you got to visualize as an audience of one. And that just really stuck with me. I use that visual now still, of even if I'm having a bad game or whatnot, just looking up to the stands and seeing God sitting there, just an audience of one, and recognizing that regardless of what you're doing on the ice, there was nothing that you could do to disappoint him, especially with hockey. I guess you could say turning over the puck really doesn't have much relevance to your life with Christ. So for me, that's been a big transformation in my life, and ultimately has helped me with hockey. And then aside from that, just focusing on being a better person. Those things have really helped to not put all of my purpose or attention within what other people are saying, but trying to, base that more in Christ.
Tremendous answers. The ultimate goal, obviously, is to win the Stanley Cup or win the game. And you have that euphoria, that excitement, but then there's the next day. And I thought that you had some interesting comments from the athletes on what about after you win it? What's next?
Yeah, that's a real challenge. I think oftentimes in life we think that if we just get that elusive thing that we've always wanted, whether it's a promotion or a cup, that we somehow believe we're going to get this like impermeable sense of contentment. But achievements are kind of like manna in the wilderness. If you remember that story where the Israelites are traveling and they're looking for food, and God says, you can collect as much of this manna as you can eat for one day, but if you try and take it for more than a day, it's going to rot out. And a lot of times our achievements are like that. They satisfy us temporarily, but if we think that's going to help us have a contentment that's going to be unbreakable or unshakable, we're just mistaken. We need to put our hope in something that really lasts, in someone who we can really base our life on. And I believe only that can be found in Christ.
And an interesting thing was said at your church service by one of the athletes regarding the glory and then what comes after winning.
Yeah, I love listening to Adam Mcquaid's thoughts. I think they're really powerful.
Since I was 5 years old, I was playing hockey and so disciplined and devoted to that. I think the ultimate prize is playing in the NHL and winning Stanley Cup. And I was very fortunate my first full year in the league to win the Stanley Cup. So it was like, it kind of just got hit with everything at once. And, you know, as exciting as it all was, the time kind of passed and it was like, you know, I still have to live. Like there's still, you know, it's like you're working towards something for so long, you reach it, and then it's like, well, kind of like, what now? And it's moments like that maybe, you know, maybe similar to a moment like right now in the world, like where people are kind of like, what's going on? Like it's a moment that makes you pause and kind of question and reevaluate. And that was a moment for me that, you know, I kind of struggled through it. But yeah, it made me dive deeper into, you know, asking questions and then searching the answers.
Dave Ripper, the Bruins chaplain and also Crossway Church, thank you so much for joining us.
Ken. Yeah.
Appreciate it. God bless your ministry.
God bless you and everyone watching here today as well.
Ojeleye in the right spot. Ward is now will reset the offense. Ojeleye knocks that one down. Ojeleye takes it hard to the basket. Nance Jr. bounce pass inside, blocked from behind.
So let's talk about the other home team at the TD Garden, the Boston Celtics. Semi Ojeleye has become a fan favorite in his 3 seasons with the Green, and the Seas were having a great season before the pandemic hit, and now they hope to resume the season on July 31st if all goes well. I had a chance to talk to Semi about the abrupt halt in the season and about how he has navigated this very difficult time.
We all got ripped out of our normal rhythms, whether we were getting ready for the next game or the next class or graduation or the next season, like getting ready to see our parents even, our friends. We can't do that anymore. And having our rhythm broken like that is tough, and having to adapt is something that we hardly ever want to do. But the beauty in that is that this time in our lives help us to step back. I mean, it's forced, but in a way we, you know, get to put life on pause. And right now we get to think about the tough questions, like what we're really chasing. I found myself in that same grind, that same rhythm, and you easily forget why you even started doing what you're doing. You know, whether you're in college and trying to finish up your major, you just started, you don't know what you want to be. You get to really sit down and think, you know, what are my goals? Like, what do I really want to do with my life? And you get to do it during a time with no distractions. I mean, there's nothing for you to do, really nowhere for you to go except to just sit and really ponder like where you want to take your life.
When I was in junior high school, I felt like it didn't fit anywhere. You're in a place where you feel like you don't really belong. Who am I? That kind of thing. So what do you say to students who are going through a period in their lives about trying to identify who they are and what God has for them? Or should they even believe in God?
Right. I mean, I think in this life, it's easy to identify yourself with what someone else wants you to be. And when you do that, you will get to a point where you feel unsatisfied and unfulfilled. And that is not a good place to be. For myself, I found myself there in college, and I was sitting there with a failing, basketball career at a Division I school at Duke, like a top tier school, and I went there and I failed. Like I could not cut it, and I had to transfer. And that's when I hit, I guess, what I call rock bottom. And I realized my identity was attached to me wearing a jersey, me being an athlete, me being a student athlete, and that wasn't enough. If we try to identify ourselves with anything in this world, it will fail us. I mean, our lives are temporary, our fame is temporary, money, our appearance, all of that is temporary. So we need something eternal. And if we think for a second that our lives are long enough to just figure it out on the way, it'll be too late. So I encourage all of us to find that eternal identity in Christ, because we have that identity in Him, and trusting in Him and being able to live our lives to help someone else, not for ourselves. That's when you feel fulfilled, and that's when you have that purpose and that peace. Because without that peace in this life, you just run into all types of problems and issues.
It's interesting how we look at other lives and we think those people have it all together, but we're really all the same. We have the same insecurities, don't we?
Right. 100%. I mean, I will say that if anyone tells you that they're completely secure, they're lying. If they tell you that they don't have a void that they're trying to fill, again, they're lying. We're all chasing something, trying to satisfy ourselves in some way every single day. Doesn't matter how much money you have or how much status or how much you've achieved, like you're still going after something, trying to fill that void. And the only thing that can fill it is Christ.
So your parents immigrated from Nigeria and you were in Kansas of all places.
Right.
And so you fitting in was not easy from the very beginning. So you had to kind of identify who you were and make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Kansas, a small town called Ottawa, between 10 and 15,000 people. It's grown a little bit, but not that many people there. And I was one of the few Black students in my school, so that was already one of the things I had to grow up and try to figure out and navigate. And then my parents are Nigerian, so we have a different culture. I'm speaking a different language at home and have different customs, and when they come over, we're saying different things. They're like, what's the deal with this? So all of that kind of compiles together, and I'm like, I'm different. I feel like I'm different from everybody else. And the only thing that kept me going was my parents told me about God, about Christ, and realizing that He that was in me is greater than he that's in the world. So I had that identity in Him, and I had to hang on to that.
Is it what does it mean to you to finally see some of that hard work pay off?
I thank God. My faith in Jesus is what keeps me going, and I thank God for nights like this. And when it's not like this, I still thank Him for it.
Very insightful. Really admire his faith walk and what he's doing in the community.
Yeah, Shemi's really impressive.
All right, let's take a swing into our next guest.
Okay.
We'll all recognize him.
That's right. Well, I'm really happy to introduce an old friend and big Red Sox fan favorite, Trot the Dirt Dog Nixon, and his sons Chase and Luca with us here today too.
Call for a big fly. Nixon high in the air, deep to center. Burns is back at the warning track at the wall. It's gone! And the Red Sox have stayed alive with a win in the 11th.
It's fun to have you guys here on our Father's Day theme. Welcome.
Thanks for having us, guys.
So, Trot, you've been coaching these guys up down there quite a bit the last few years?
Yeah, last few years. This year's been a little bit difficult during the baseball season. Consider all the COVID-19 that's been going around. So, unfortunately, it's cut our season short. It would have been the first time since, I believe, Chase was 8 years old that they were both on the same team this year. But we got cut short. We still try to maintain whatever we are able to do, hitting in the cage, throwing. We get an opportunity to get some ground balls and fly balls, we do. But they're obviously one's graduating tomorrow. Chase is graduating tomorrow. And Luke is a rising sophomore. So all the football coaching that I've done is pretty much wrapped up. I let the high school guys do that. I just help with the baseball program at New Hanover High School.
That's great. Well, you got Chase on your left and Luke on the right. And Chase, I was looking online. It looked like you had quite a football season this past year, your senior year in high school.
I did. It was a great year. We went 13, all right? Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The entire year was just a dream come true for me.
How about you, Luke? You active in sports?
Yes, sir. I played football this year on the JV team.
So Trot, it was always great having you as the chapel leader with the Red Sox, and you had strong faith that led the way for our team there. We had a high attendance at chapel, and keeping with the family theme here, how did your faith help you with marriage and family?
Well, one thing with the Red Sox and being chapel leader, it wasn't really like it was. I played on some teams where we had a great group of guys that wanted to be in chapel, wanted to do Bible studies. So it wasn't me going in there and trying to make guys coming to baseball chapel. We had just a fantastic group for pretty much most of the years that I was there. So it's a testament to the guys that in that clubhouse, especially in '04, '03, '04, and '05. As far as my walk, with my family, I think it's just you see the characteristics, being a Christian husband and a Christian father, and it's just something that I've learned over the years, growing in my faith and so forth. That I want my kids to be able to, understand Jesus Christ is, and for them to have a personal relationship themselves with Jesus Christ, be able to find a Christ-like, woman in the future. That's what I have in Catherine, and so it makes our lives pretty much as a family are centered around Christ. Christ is at the top of kind of the pyramid, and we kind of try to do all things through Him, and it just kind of gives us a base and accountability, as a family. And the most important thing is for me personally, for Luke, for Chase, for Captain personally, you have that accountability, and you always have someone there. Christ never leaves you nor forsakes you. So we have that understanding, and having that personal relationship. Also, I know in these times that are tough, a lot of people are looking for that remedy. With what's going on right now, I think this remedy allows us to either get into the Word or speak or do Zoom calls, do Bible studies, and so forth. Number one, it can take our mind off of things that are going on, but it also we start to understand the purpose and the meaning of our lives through Christ. And so I just think it's, I think also what I was trying to want people to kind of understand is in these days of quarantine, you're not alone. It's real easy for a non-believer to say, yeah, I am alone. But actually, with a personal relationship with Christ, you're never alone.
Well, maybe we can take a step or two back. Could you give us a little briefly, anyway, share a little bit how you actually came to Christ?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home. We always went to church. If athletics and getting into high school, if I was able to, after practice on Wednesday night, would have a group on Wednesday night. I try to participate in that. Most of my friends that I went to church with went to a rival high school, so that always made some really good camaraderie. But just a great time. Teachers, our leaders, and so forth. It inspired me, and I think that's the biggest thing was being able for young people to, whether they're going to youth group or going to Sunday school, is when you have these leaders that kind of inspire kids. They want to be there and want to be there learning and communicating with their friends and so forth, being around them. So that's kind of what it was like for me, but I really didn't understand that personal relationship. I accepted Jesus Christ. I think it was in June 1993, just after I was drafted, getting ready to go to Fort Myers, Florida. We have, where the Red Sox had training. I was actually going for an instructional league. So I prayed to accept Jesus Christ into my heart, and But I really kind of didn't know, what that meant. I knew that he was, I understood who Jesus Christ was to me. But sometimes I was a little bit afraid. Maybe I didn't understand what I was reading in the Bible and so forth. I just didn't have that, I think, relationship with guys around me that could help me guide through there. And, and obviously yourself, once I got to the big leagues, had you were around, you were steadily around constantly, at the ballpark on Sundays and so forth. So you're that kind of that figure that I could attach to. Catherine and I, spent a lot of time, in the Word, Bible studies, and so forth. Started to grow more. I was baptized, Pine Valley Baptist Church, the church that I grew up in. Has always been something that was important to me because, I knew who Jesus Christ was to me, what he did for me on the cross, and I wanted to have that relationship in my life.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I think you've done a great job being a father and a husband, and always enjoy spending time with you and Catherine during your times in Boston. And so how, maybe briefly, how did it affect the way you played? That you're always such an intense, aggressive player. Did your faith help you to relax, make you more intense, or how did it make a difference for you?
I think it was always good to, when times were tough, that with the people that I had around me, not only yourself, but Reverend Gray, Mike Timlin, Mike Stanley, these kind of guys, the veteran guys could always encourage me to go into the Word in certain parts of the Bible and, get kind of some kind of perspective on maybe what I was going through. I always understood, the biggest thing was I always understood that, Christ was right beside me. He was never going to put me in a situation that I could not handle.
Now, I understood, I know you went on some mission trips. When you were a player, you were telling me after you retired that you wanted to do some mission trips overseas. And could you share a little bit about what you've done with that?
Through baseball, and it's going to the Czech Republic. And in the Czech Republic, we went there as a baseball / mission, called it a baseball mission trip. So we would do clinics along with a few other former players. A couple of them were still active. And Jay Stott with Purpose Driven Baseball, he kind of had built a relationship in the Czech Republic for about 20 years. And this was probably back when probably 2010. And so he's built a tremendous relationship to the point where we would go maybe to 3 different cities in the Czech Republic. We would do 2-day hitting and pitching and defensive camp, just kind of, touching base with the game of baseball with the Czech Republic. And then also, we would also incorporate, our personal experiences and our personal walks with Jesus Christ. Guys would give their testimonies and so forth.
Well, that's impressive. How far? Who knew baseball in Czechoslovakia and Eastern Europe? And it's impressive how well they've done. But it's more impressive to me that you've been willing to give your time and, like you said, pour into people's hearts. And I appreciate so much of what I appreciate about you and Catherine when you're here is you were so giving to the community, and a lot of things behind the scenes that no one knew about with the Jimmy Fund and other things. And so I think you guys have been a great example of letting Christ live through you and love others through you. So really appreciate that. So, hey, people in Boston, I miss you here. You're always loved in Boston. So I really appreciate you guys being on, and Luke and Chase, really thanks for joining us today. And we'll be catching up back with you soon, Trot.
So the amazing witness that Trot just shared with us, you have been witness to a number of testimonies like that in your time at Chapel. So there's an invitation that comes along with this too.
Yep. Yes, yeah. I really did enjoy my time with Trot and Catherine. He was a great leader behind the scenes with the guys, and like I say, he and his wife were just so giving. You could see Christ in them, and I think that was very attractive to him and to a lot of other people. So So we'd have chapel with the Red Sox every Sunday. We'd have chapel with I did the Patriots on Saturday night, and it was a weekly event. And so every year, once a year, I would at least once a year with each team, I would close out by sharing what it meant to know Christ personally, what it meant to have a relationship with Him, and so that way, if guys wanted to start that relationship, they could. And I'd like to kind of close our time out similarly here with a prayer. And I know for me, when I was 18, I'd gone through some hard times in life. My parents had passed when I was 13, and my best friend got killed the same year. And things were difficult, and I stayed friends with my Little League coach. And I remember being down at his house one night, and we were watching a show very similar to this, Ken, where some people were sharing about what it meant to know Christ. And I was really seeking, and I was really at a hurting point in my life, and I was looking for that in my life. And so I started asking my coach, I said, well, Coach, I want this. I think this makes sense, but I don't totally understand. Could you share a little more with me about what does this mean? I don't understand. And so he went on to explain to me that even though I'd gone through some hard times, that God loved me very much and really cared about me. He wanted to lead me through the rest of my life. But he told me there was some bad news too, and that was that we all sinned. And it says in Romans 3:23 that for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And he explained to me that God was just and perfect and holy. And he couldn't just look the other way on that. So he was, on the one hand, he loved me very much. On the other hand, he had to hold me accountable for things done to really be just. But he said the good news was that he loved me so much that he was willing to come to this earth and pay the price for me. So on the one hand, he found me guilty. On the other hand, said, hey, I love you. I'll pay the price for you. And that's why Jesus came down to this earth and went to the cross and shed his blood for me to wash away my sins, to be an atonement for me, to be a sacrifice for me. And that's what my coach is telling me. And finally, it all started to click. My coach helped me understand the reality of heaven and hell. And, it's a hard thing to talk about. People don't like to talk about the reality of hell, but it needs to be considered because, like I said, God is holy and Christ is offering to pay that price for me. So that all started to make sense to me as we were sitting there talking. And I remember a verse that says, God demonstrates his own love toward us. Even while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So that, I just grew up thinking, well, if my good deeds outweigh my bad, I'm in. But my coach explained to me that no, it doesn't quite work that way, and that Jesus loved me so much that he was willing to die for me. And, I was just ready. In certain times in life, you need to be ready. Sometimes I think people out there watching may be going through some really hard times, or things become unstable. Things we thought were stable in the last few months, all of a sudden they're not so stable. Yeah. And that was very much what it was like for me at that age because of the difficulties I'd been through. And like I say, I think sometimes you have to come to that end in yourself before you're ready to surrender. So what happens, my coach and I talked that night, and I went home and I just got down on my knees, and I remember the moment I got down next to the bed. It was kind of a childlike prayer, but I just said, Jesus, please forgive me. Please forgive me for anything I've done wrong. I thank you for your sacrifice for me. And I thank you that you rose from the dead and you're still alive and you are Lord. And I want to follow you now. I want to submit to you. I want to follow you. And I just prayed that. And, it wasn't overly emotional for me, but something different happened. I knew there was something different, and it totally changed my life in a good way. He became a really rock for me to stand on. And that was the best decision I ever made in life. So that was the decision I made. And I'm just thinking there might be some folks watching us here, hearing from these different athletes, there might be time for them to pray that prayer. Like I said, I closed out our chapels a couple of times a year like this. So I'd like to close our time today by just saying a prayer. And if anybody out there is ready to ask Jesus to forgive them, to give them eternal life, and to lead them and guide them, they can pray this prayer with me. And you could just pray silently in your heart, or you could pray out loud. So I'm just gonna bow in prayer. And if anybody'd like to follow in that prayer with me, I want you to just go ahead and do that, okay? Lord Jesus, thank you that you died on the cross for me, that you shed your blood for me. Please forgive me for anything I've done wrong or will do wrong. I need your forgiveness, and I ask you for that. Thank you that you rose from the dead Easter morning, and I ask you to be Lord of my life. I ask you to lead me and guide me, and from the inside, make me the kind of person you want me to be. Amen. Well, thanks for letting me close that way, Ken. I just want to advise anybody that may have prayed that prayer with me, that they would, you can get a Bible app, just on a phone even, just called the Bible app. And just what my coach told me was the beginning of a personal relationship where I talk to him, that's prayer. he talks to me back to the Word. You could just read a chapter a day, let's say in the book of Luke, and you'll be amazed how relevant it is for everyday life. I'd also encourage anybody watching that maybe prayed that or has more interest that someone probably invited you to watch this and to get in touch with them, and they can help you grow in this personal relationship and get you involved with a church near you by that you could really get to know some folks and start that journey with Christ. And it's the best decision you could ever make. So thanks.
The Lord changes lives, and we're going to give the final word to Brian Doyle, who is the National Director of Iron Sharpens Iron.
What a great time we've had. What a privilege it is to be around God's men. Now it's an opportunity to be an influencer. You know, we know that God's plan is to build men, but with others in mind. It's not just about us. It's about all those people that we impact and get to influence. So let's go out and be that kind of influence today. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope to see you at Fenway Park, or Gillette Stadium, or someplace we can celebrate New England sports together.